All right, we have hit noon, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank you all for making it all the way to the very last time slot of the Cali conference for 2015, and for sticking around and being willing to listen to perhaps another presentation on pedagogy and assessments in legal research instruction. So my name is Michelle Trumbo. I'm the Electronic Services Librarian at Indiana University, Maurer School of Law in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm also a reference librarian, and this particular presentation came up as a result of our 4 semesters teaching advanced legal research. We started in the fall of 2013, and what we found was it really isn't as easy as it looks. And we had a lot of trouble figuring out how to assess students, so we began looking at some ways to make assessments more effective, to incorporate them fully into the learning process, and in doing so looked behind the scenes at some of the underlying adult learning tips and kind of elements of teaching adults. So this was the problem that we encountered, is we became accidental educators. Probably like a lot of you in the room, if you're a librarian or a technologist, you may not have had much of a background in formal instruction or education, and you may, as we were, kind of be forced or thrust into a role where suddenly you're doing that for a significant portion of your work life. And you may, in some circumstances at least, personally, my level of formal training and how to educate others was limited to 2 years of teaching 4th graders in a Sunday school class, and all of a sudden you're staring at a room full of law students and you know that you cannot do a Noah's Ark diorama with them. That's not going to be well received, it's not going to be appropriate, and it's not going to teach them how to do legal research. So I think the easiest place to start with how to begin instructing law students is to think about who they are and what their attributes are, and in some cases what their unique attributes are. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that they're adult learners. These aren't children. These are highly educated people with some background in higher education, and they come to your classroom with a lot of different experiences, different age levels. They're full-grown adults and people, even if sometimes they don't always act that way. They're also going to be future attorneys or legal practitioners for the most part. You may have that small subset that go on to become legal scholars, or they're going to do something different with their GAD, but by and large, the bulk of the students that we are teaching and reaching out to are going to practice law and are going to use legal research in that context. They're competitive. They really like to compete with each other. Law school does not seem to be a place that wallflowers seek out. And they're often very independent thinkers and high achievers. So what does that mean? So adult learning is its own study, and I think if you've seen some of the other programs, they've probably introduced you to the concepts of andragogy or andragogy, which is the art or science of teaching adults. And these are some of the unique characteristics for adult learners. They tend to be self-directed and independent, which means, practically speaking, it's very difficult to get them to work in groups, and they like to solve problems and approach tasks on their own terms. They're often internally motivated. It's really hard to externally motivate a student. They're somewhat motivated by food, for instance. But not like children are motivated by food. So it's got to be, you know, the right food, and they also have to be internally inclined to be learning whatever you're trying to bribe them to do. They often, like everybody, accumulate experience over time, and they're bringing that experience into your classroom. Their readiness to learn is related to their adult social roles. And this is where the fact that they're going to be lawyers and they're currently law students comes into play. Their willingness to learn what you're teaching them in the classroom needs to be tied directly to their life as a law student or how their life is going to be as a lawyer, or else they are not listening to you and they're likely tuning you out. They are problem-centered. Adults are natural problem solvers. We usually leave behind our willingness and desire to kind of indulge in really subject-centered education in college. People graduate from college and then they want things that are relevant to their life, that are going to help them solve a problem or be more effective or efficient in the future. And then the final part is, when they learn something, they want to apply it right away. They don't want this to be something that they are not going to use or need for some period of time. So immediate application of new knowledge is particularly important. So, knowing what we know about adult learners can lead us to some more theories about how to assist learning and retention in our adult students. And these are 5 of some of the easiest ways that you can incorporate these learning aids and skills into your legal research instruction. So, to reach adult learners, you should introduce complex topics repeatedly over a period of time. And a lot of people do this in their syllabi. They'll have daily quizzes. There'll be some sort of marker of achievement throughout the course of the semester. You also want to correct mistakes close in time to the time that you're assessing or testing them. You want to encourage them to take the skills that they've learned and to branch off and use them in different ways. And this is one of the more important ones that we're going to talk about, we want to make sure that we're using the learning outcomes that we've established for our classes to shape the forms of assessment that we give them. And we want to finally create readiness for learning by using experiential instruction techniques. And some of these are really, really probably obvious, but it's nice to think of them in a concrete way and to have them laid out in front of you so that you can really craft your assessments appropriately. So, when we started teaching advanced legal research, we had, I have a colleague in the room, but we had not a clue how to structure the class, how to assess people, how to format it. It was kind of a mess. And so, being adults ourselves, the first thing that adults usually do when they encounter a new challenge is to go back and think about their own past experiences and use those to kind of formulate a path for the future. So what we did was we went back to advanced legal research classes and syllabi that we had previously, either in library school or in law school, and we dredged out some of those techniques and structures to kind of cobble together what we were going to do that first semester in advanced legal research. And that first semester, it was 12 students, and we had 15 research exercises that were about 10 questions apiece. We had, at the end, we had a practicum that was designed to be basically a speed test scavenger hunt, where they were given 4 questions that were very straightforward and very basic, like, at what age in Virginia can you marry without your parents' consent? And so they would have 4 questions along those lines. There was a statute, treaties, legislative history, and they had 55 minutes to go out into the library or to use their computer to retrieve the answer and have it checked off a list. And that particular tool we call it practicum, and it came directly from a legal bibliography course that was designed for people who were going to be law librarians. And what we found was it was not very effective for teaching law students how to be lawyers because they don't look or use legal information in that way. So it got mixed reviews. And it's not the way that class looks anymore, but that's where we started out from. And so what we then did is go back to see what other people were doing. And so that's what these 3 facts are. This is part of an ongoing survey. The top 50 distinction is not any nod at not looking at everybody. It's only as far as we were able to get by the time this presentation rolled around. So at this point, a full 78% of the top 50 law schools have an advanced legal research survey course, either in 2014 to 2015 or 2015 to 2016. This does not even include people who have opted to do 1-credit specialized legal research courses. So when you take those into account, almost everybody has some sort of advanced legal research instruction in one format or another. And all but 2 of those classes are taught by law librarians and technologists. So most of these courses were 2 or 3 credit hours, with the majority also awarding letter grade scores rather than being pass-fail. And this is why we actually started, was to see what other people were doing, how they were assessing their students. And what we found were the methods of assessment really varied. So assessment is actually just one piece of a larger instructional puzzle, and it's often a piece that kind of gets short shrift. The 5 essential elements of effective teaching are the course content itself, the instruction that you give, so the presentations, the lectures in class, the physical and social environments, so your physical classroom surroundings, as well as the relationships between the instructor and the students, and then the peer-to-peer relationships that are going on in the environment. And then that final piece is assessment. And my focus today is going to be on assessment. So we all generally know what assessments are. They are used to make judgments about student knowledge and skills based on the observation of student behavior or inspection of some sort of student work product. Why do we assess people? There are a couple different reasons. The first reason is the primary reason, which is to determine whether students are learning what we believe that they should learn. And the second, but I think equally important reason that is often overlooked, is we need to give students information about their course performance to further promote learning. So how they do on the assessment gives them a sense of their own level of achievement with respect to the course objectives. And then that leads us to knowing these factors, knowing what we know about adult learners. How do we then go forward and assess if they're learning the legal research skills and competencies that we think they should? And that is the question I'm hoping to shed some light on today. So there are 3 elements of effective assessment according to the literature. And that is validity, reliability, and fairness. Validity is how well an assessment measures what it is intended to measure. And that also includes the issue of congruence. Is your assessment aligned with your teaching and your course objectives? Reliability. Will this assessment reliably determine whether people are learning skills? It should be repeatable, and student performance should be the same every time. And fairness. Is it procedurally and substantively equitable and free from bias? People overlook fairness, but fairness also includes testing students on things that you have not introduced in class or shown them. That would make an assessment inherently unfair and biased. It would favor students who had somehow received that information or instruction outside of your classroom. So if you haven't taught it, don't test it. So, knowing that, I've put together some really basic steps to creating your assessments, and this is the general flow chart. And I will say before I start that the orange and blue, selecting the mode of assessment and choosing the course objectives that you're going to test, can be flip-flopped or can be used to determine the other. So they're really more at a flat level rather than a linear up and down. So, selecting the mode of assessment. As part of our ALR course survey, we took a look at all of the available syllabi. We contacted librarians who were teaching ALR courses to see what they were doing. If they were willing to share their syllabi, we were happy to take that. If anyone in the room has a syllabus that they would love to share with us, I would love to see it so we can add to the list of how people are assessing legal research instruction in their own classrooms. I promise to keep it confidential, but please email me because I'll be reaching out to you shortly if I don't hear from you. And this is what we found. Generally speaking, these are the types of assessment modes that are currently in use. Some people have elected to do the Pathfinder Research Guide. Some give their students scavenger hunts. Research exercises are very popular. Others have gone a more practice-focused route. They're having their students do research memos. They're having their students create client emails or client counseling letters. There were a few people who did oral examinations. I'm not quite sure what that is or how they're using that technique, but I found that to be an interesting development. Quizzes, also very popular, in-class presentations, and some people had them document their research process in a research narrative format. Does anyone in the room want to share, do they have anything beyond these modes that they use in their own? Yes, sir?
Well, that I don't use anymore, but I used to give a multiple choice final exam.
Okay. And how?
But as my enrollment diminished because the other classes did not, the other ALR classes didn't have a final, I switched to the Pathfinder.
Did you find that there were strengths to the multiple choice format?
Well, there were certain, specific things I wanted them to know. Like if you see a case citation that's 354 Northeast 2nd 25, what do you know about that case? Well, it's a state court case. It's not a federal. Okay. So that was the kinds of things I put on the, and the way I did it was that every week in homework assignments there would be some multiple choice questions. And then the final would be pulled from those questions we'd run over in class.
How did you feel about the student performance in that method? Were they successful with the multiple choice?
They were very successful.
And do you find the Pathfinder to be kind of an equivalent swap, or better or worse?
I find the Pathfinder to be a lot more work for me. A lot harder to grade.
Do you let them pick their own topic?
Yes.
Yeah, the subjective analysis is a little bit more difficult when you don't have that kind of multiple choice, like it's either a yes or a no or a right or a wrong. And thank you. Anybody else, ma'am?
Well, I'm one of the people that probably responded about oral exams, so I thought since you left it hanging there, I'd fill you in on how I do it. I prepare 8 to 10 research scenarios. These are classes that are capped at 20. And so the student comes in, they draw one of them, and then they go out and research. I started out at 4 hours, I reduced it to 3, and this year I did 2. They go out, and so then they come back and tell me how they went about their research, how they started verifying what they were looking at. And that pretty much gives me a good idea of what they've come up with, and if they're going along an efficient path, or if they're missing something obvious. Sometimes it was like they misread the facts, and so that was part of the assessment, how well they looked at the various words that were in the, just something as simple as that, because when they get out in that firm, they're going to have to listen to every word that the attorney says. So I've been using that for a couple of years, and it's not my original idea. I will say that I got that idea from my colleague who used to do it in a first-year research class years ago, and so.
And ma'am, how did you develop that idea? It's a great and it's a pretty unique one. It's not.
It was in the first year class when we did it. We graded. There were 2 of us that did this, so we cooperated, thank God. And again, we had several questions that related to this first year legal research. The student picked 4 questions, and they were very basic, and had to walk us through solving it. We were with them while they did it. And if we realized partway through that they were going to fail abysmally, or maybe not even that much, but we're going to fail, we would say, this is not going well for you, is it? And we would then, they would sign up to do it again with the other librarians. That way it was fair. Because we had sign-up sheets. Because this took a while to do. And I've done it a couple of times. I was really just kind of raising my hand to tell you, I teach advanced legal research now as an online course. And it's asynchronous, completely online. And I give, problem sets, not treasure hunts, but, okay, the client walks in your office, here's his problem, what you gonna do? I require, and I've kicked it up to giving them a form, a research log and strategy sheet that must be completed, and I grade it. And I also require that they bill their client. And I tell them, and I explain, hey, this is, you know, you're billing your time at $125 an hour, okay? This is what you're going to have to bill if you use Westlaw or Lexis. And I explain variations in pricing. But this is what you're going to have to bill. And I grade the bill too.
Do you have a checklist that you use, or some sort of,
Yes.
Is it a rubric or a?
Actually, I have a form for billing their client. Yes. Oh, I have forms for everything. It helps me, and it makes it consistent.
I think one of the things I found for doing it for advanced legal research is, you know, they will use Google to find something, they'll find a website, and it's been interesting to watch, even though we've talked about verification all along the semester, how many of them actually take the time to see, oh, they came back with this statute, and one of them actually never went to the statutes to look that it had been repealed. You know, I mean, it's just, it's still astonishing to me that after you think you've given them all the principles and they've had to do it in their weekly assignments, that they just forget it when they're under time pressure. But I always point out to them, well, you know, get your plan, because when you're in that law office and you're feeling that pressure, you're going to need to have some kind of plan in mind so you don't skip a step.
And their laziness, ingenuity is, I mean, they will beat you every time. Every semester, I'm like, wow, they're outsmarting me and thwarting me again. Thank you very much. That's a really fascinating way to assess that. Ma'am in the pink?
If you're willing to do it kind of free form, I partner with the graduate and undergraduate entrepreneurial courses and have the 2 or 3 students for each of the people who want to participate. So they have to interview the client, they have to get the information, they have to do the research, and then they have to give an opinion letter to the client on whether or not the business they want to do is a valid business and what are the legal issues associated with that. But that means you have to kind of be really willing to go freeform, and you have to be willing to do the research yourself, because you have to provide the right information to the people in that class. If you don't want to be as freeform, and for me it depends how many students I have. I've done M&A situations, and I draw out the whole M&A situation, and then I take and group the legal issues that I've built into the problem set and group them into 4 groups. Then I make them do the research as a group, and they get to choose their group members and which topics they want to pick. And then I make them do a presentation to the partners on the research that they've done based on the M&A situation, because M&As are always great. They have all kinds of things you can build in. I've gotten faculty to show up and ask the questions.
Nice.
So when you get your tax professor asking the tax issues.
How many students are you able to accommodate in that format?
I tend to do no more than 12, because it is really, really labor intensive. And if you're doing 3 hours a week, but it also means that your last 2 weeks are presentations. Or your last 2 classes are presentations. And then you've got your Skype interviews, and you've got to bring somebody in to talk about interviewing. But I mean, it also builds into the skills that you need them to be developing, not just in research.
It's like completely immersive. It ties into that experiential experience.
How many credit hours? 3. It's a 3. Okay. Well, I was thinking, I don't see how we could do that in a 2.
Yeah, I teach specialized 1 credit, and I don't do that at all in the 1 credit. You just don't have the time.
Ma'am in the back?
This isn't actually me, this is my director, but she does something really interesting that I'd never heard of before. She lets the students pick what type of firm they want to create, and has them write up a paper on choosing what they need for their law library. So based on cost, you know, based on what they're going to need at that particular firm. And she says that works out really well.
And then she just grades them on which resources they've chosen to include, basically, and which they may have excluded.
Yeah, and their explanations.
Does she give them a budget?
I don't remember, because it's not my class.
That's a really unique way of doing it, but it does assess, especially how well they're grasping the legal bibliography and the sources. Anyone have an alternative form of assessment? Yes, ma'am?
It's not alternative, but something I tried this year that worked pretty well. I like research exercises because I don't think they're going to know how to use a resource unless they've had experience in it. And but what we did is started with, they tried it, their initial encounter with this resource was as a group. And that was kind of the formative, and it was lower stakes, and it was less stressful, and then they had an assignment where they were fully responsible for it. So it was, you know, the same type of assessment, but just group and individual, change how we did it.
Yes, sir.
Well, I have them do some assignments in my ALR class, but then they have a final exam. And I found the last couple years, I have them come up with a research strategy, and the question I found that I've kind of reused in different forms that I found to be really an effective one is I have them, they're supervising an associate, and the associate is coming up with a research strategy that is very naive and completely wrong, and almost like how they started the class, and have them explain what the student's doing, what the associate's doing wrong, and how to improve their strategy.
Oh, that's excellent. It's kind of a variant of like peer-to-peer assessment or self-assessment where they can look at their own pitfalls and this hypothetical person.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. What do you call that? What do you?
Well, what do I call that?
Yeah.
The last essay on the exam.
That's fair. Well, that's really fascinating. It's been very interesting, and everyone has kind of a different take and approach. To touch on one tangent that somebody brought up about credit hours, has anyone experienced credit hour creep, where either the person in charge of your educational curriculum or someone else has asked you to go from 2 to 3 hours or 1 to 2 hours? Nobody. We've experienced that in our library. We were asked to go from a 2-credit course to a 3-credit course, and it's almost like creating it from scratch because you've got this extra 11 or 12 hours, and you have to reassess your assessment types, and it was quite. I think they thought it was going to be easy, and it wasn't. All right. Well, that's wonderful. Just for the sake of taking kind of the abstract concepts that we've talked about and trying to apply them or demonstrate how we could use them in a practical way, I've chosen just to kind of walk through the creation of a research exercise and how you can make your research exercises as effective as possible for your law students. So we've selected our mode of assessment. So we're going to do a research exercise, and now we're moving on to choosing our learning objectives. And then this one is very basic and probably overly simplistic, but the objective for this particular item on our research exercise is going to be to have the students find a specific state statute, either in print or electronically, if they're given a question or a prompt. So then you're faced with creating the problem. We know what we want them to look for. We know what kind of assessment this is going to be. Now we actually have to write it. And so the problem on the left and the problem on the right actually lead them to the exact same resource. But as you can probably tell, one should probably be preferred as far as adult learning and law student learning goes over the other. So does anyone see any shortcomings, for example, in the exercise as drafted on the left?
Not as fun.
It's not. You haven't piqued their interest. They're probably bored, and they're probably looking at this as busy work. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
There's no story.
There's no story. There's no context for this. Okay, if we find it, are you really going to be all that thrilled? Probably not. And there's no sort of context for a law student. They're like, why would I need to know this? I'm not operating an amusement park in Vermont. This is just busy work. So the one on the right kind of tries to tie in those ways of engaging them a little bit more. So giving them some experiential background, giving them this is kind of a far-fetched hypothetical, but there's a possibility that they may have a client someday walk in with this kind of scenario. It doesn't spoon feed it to them either. They have to figure out from the paragraph that they are looking for a particular statute regarding amusement ride operation. There's some analysis and some issue spotting. So, yes, sir?
Is there a point in your class when you would take A, B, and C and eliminate them and just tell Mickey what legal issues she should consider?
That's our final exam. We give them two paragraphs. It's a little bit longer of a hypothetical, and we make them write a 3 to 5 page research memo along with a research narrative so that they document their process. And they have to show us exactly what resources they consulted, what their strategies were, what their search terms were, and that sort of thing. So these exercises are designed to kind of, like building blocks, lead them to that culminating research memo, so it's not completely coming out of, yes, sir?
For you and for anybody, when you talk about the strategy and how you went to get the info, does anyone sit with students and actually go through their Westlaw search history to see if they really just did 2 keyword searches or if they did use topic and key numbers?
I do it for the 1Ls.
For 1Ls? Does anyone else do that?
I have in the past.
Okay.
And I've asked for copies of their research trails,
Yeah.
from the systems.
You can now have them share it with you. They put it in a folder.
I didn't know that, thank you. Oh.
You're making me think we're way too trusting. We just read the research narrative and take them at face value, and honestly, and Ashley, my colleague, could probably back this up, they are refreshingly honest about what they've done to get to the answer that they've given you on the paper, often to their grading detriment. Google pops up, you get -10. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I like your hypothetical, but I would be much more evil. Well, I would, because I'm looking at that, describe whether it would be legal for so-and-so to, I would go, and so-and-so wants his 15-year-old daughter to operate the ride, and I would throw in a lot of, various different points that have nothing to do with it. I keep telling them clients are not neat and tidy when they come into your office. And they don't say, I have a statutory issue, or I have a tort claim, or whatever. I said, no, they're going to tell you pretty much everything about their entire lives. So throw some garbage at them. These are advanced legal research students, is where I'm coming from. And then describe your work. Absolutely, but I used to do it a little bit more casually. Now I have a form, and I want that filled in, and it's graded.
And I absolutely, this is still a little pre-chewed for the real world, but
That's a great start. I just, like I said, I'm evil.
I'm doing this too long.
I'm also curious to know, because how you conduct your advanced legal research class may actually be confined or dictated by the extent of the legal research instruction that they get in the first year. So some people have the luxury of having a complete class. We have exactly 4 lectures with them that are predefined by the writing director. And so what we end up with in advanced legal research is, it should probably be retitled, but then they wouldn't take it because they would be insulted. And yes, sir.
I just had a question. Well, at what point do you administer this type of question?
This would
semester?
Throughout the semester.
throughout yeah, we would give a lecture on this particular topic. So this was lifted from a constitutions and statutes research exercise assignment that we give them, and we would give them this. It would drop immediately after that series of lectures was completed.
Okay.
And they would have a week, and there'd be 10 of these. What we find is that if they're written like the one on the right, they're more likely to actually do it. If they're written like the one on the left, we find answer sharing, collaboration, and basically you have one person who like really cares about legal research and he just passes that assignment completely completed to everybody else in the class. So we've gotten a little bit, not quite as devious as some, but that's where the describe your search comes in. And we try to hold them a little bit accountable. All right, then comes the grading. Obviously in our previous problem, the hypo on the left is really easy to grade. They either get it right or they don't, and you can breeze through them. So if you have a large advanced legal research class, it's very tempting to do that kind of assessment because we're busy people with, quite frankly, usually other jobs. We have other tasks and responsibilities besides instruction, and instruction is an overload for a lot of librarians and technologists, so I completely understand wanting to go with that. To be most effective with your grading, so here's the responses and a hypothetical search description. And so this student actually did not do terribly. They found the correct statute, they found the penalty statute, and their search strategy was probably average to slightly above average. It wasn't awful, they found the right answer. And then the question becomes, how would you grade this? So for the first two items, probably just a check mark, and then this is just a sample. More could probably be said about this search description, but this is probably the kind of feedback that you'd want to give them. Give them an alternative method that might be faster for them, and perhaps a different way to use the keywords or search terms that they've opted to use, depending on what the description seems to suggest to you.
Excuse me, do you meet with each one of them and go over their assignments with them individually?
That's a great question. We do if they want to talk about it. We have a very open door policy, and the way our library is structured, we are always available. So they come by, and if they have a question or want to be walked through, we do walk through it with them.
You don't make it mandatory?
No. Our last semester we had 38 people we were asked. We initially had a 20-person cap, and then we were asked to increase it. So we had almost 40 people, and it became... yeah, exactly. There just weren't enough hours in the day, unfortunately. But what it meant was our primary mode of feedback and communication with them was through Canvas, our online course site. So we had to get really detailed about our feedback, and that was time consuming too, but at least that was asynchronous. We could do that on our own time, at lunch, late at night, whenever the need arose. And one of the things, and we're going to talk about this later, we tried to get them turned around in a week because one of the top adult learning tips is to return your feedback close in time to the assessment itself so that it still has some meaning for them and they remember kind of what they did and you can actually adjust their trajectory. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so when I was teaching at ALR, we actually didn't cap our class for various reasons, so we had 80 students in each semester. Whoa. And so you can't provide that kind of feedback every week. And so for a problem like this one, what we did that actually worked pretty well, and it's not going to give them a grade, but it's going to give them feedback, is you have them do that problem in class, and they work on it in class quickly, they can talk to the person next to them, and then you go over that problem in class, and you're soliciting answers from them and then sort of being like, another thing you might try is this. And so you're not giving feedback to everyone, but they're all hearing some stuff and they're all seeing some stuff. And I mean, that was the only way we could manage that size of a class.
Did you give them research exercises to do on their own?
Yeah, we did like just a big mix. So they had a big research, they could choose either a sort of Pathfinder type thing or a more research memo, depending on what they chose. And they needed to get that topic approved with us beforehand, and they could meet with us if they wanted. And then we went through and we graded all of them, but we weren't able to give personalized feedback this year just because of the numbers, but hopefully next year, we'll see.
All right, so that's kind of a basic, how you would address a very simple one-off research exercise assessment question. Oftentimes you'll stray, and people have shared this, you'll stray into types of assessments that don't lend themselves to check marks, or they don't really lend themselves to this kind of paragraph format feedback. And you'll need some sort of form or a checklist or a rubric that you can use to kind of quickly go through however many students you have and sort out what their grade should be for that particular skill that they're supposed to learn. And so the other part of this presentation is kind of an easy 4-step method to creating a rubric for yourself, which can be time-consuming on the front end, but save you a lot of time on the back end if you do it correctly. So step 1, this is probably slightly repetitive. You want to identify the learning objective that you are trying to impart and assess in the assessment mode. So for this particular example, I've just taken these directly from the AALL Legal Research Competencies and Standards for Law Student Information Literacy, so they're very broad. And they're both based on their subparts of Principle 2. So for this particular rubric, we're creating one to assess whether they understand the operation of both free and subscription search platforms sufficiently to create appropriate and relevant search queries. And then as a sub part of that, that they are able to identify and analyze the underlying legal issues that we are trying to have them research. So step 2. This is one of the more thought-provoking steps. What you're supposed to do based on the literature about creating rubrics and doing adult assessment is you're supposed to formulate in your mind a description of a top level, like an excellent answer, and then your bottom basement, this person learned nothing in my class type of answer. And so this, for this particular set of objectives, our bottom student fails to supply terms adequate to fully research the question posed. And for our top level, they have generated these beautiful keywords and phrases as suggested by the hypothetical. And in an ideal world, they would have included synonyms in case their initial inclinations about the keywords or phrases was a little off, or they didn't know enough about the topic. And this is kind of a way to capture the awesome and the awful. And this is actually trickier than it may look. What you don't want to do in this particular step is to say, students' search terms were bad. Students' search terms were good. And that seems very basic, but when I was creating the rubric for our legal research memo, that was the first thing I wrote. I was like, students' research terms were terrible. And that doesn't help you assess them at all. So make it a concrete objective, but make it general enough that you're not excluding people who are actually placing themselves in a high-performing category. Ma'am?
Did you give it to them before they did the exercise?
I've done it both ways. In the fall, we did not give them the rubric beforehand, and in the spring we did, and I thought it was going to make a difference. It didn't. The excellent students in the class looked at the rubric, and they did excellently, and they probably would have anyway. And then, you know, our not as proficient performers didn't look at it.
We very much the same thing. I mean, when we teach searching, we say these are the elements of an adequate search. And when we, we don't give them the rubric in our first set of exercises, but we give the rubric back to them when we grade them. And we have the same question on the next assignment, and we get the same results. We have given you, this is what we have assigned points to, and the second time you do it, you still don't give us all these things, so you don't get all the points. And the third time you do this, you still don't do all these things, so you don't get all the points.
Ma'am?
I'm sorry. And I appreciate what you're doing. I really do. But look, guys, this seems to me to be very librarian to me. A good search is if they find the right answer. okay? And I can have students that would not come up with the search terms that I think rock, and they find the right answer. And they document for me that they did it. So I'm just saying, that's what I'm, okay. When they're out in practice as an attorney, oh, well, let's see. Terms and connectors, should I do that? Should I do natural language? They don't have the time. They've got to get competent skills to quickly find the answer that they need. And it might not be the way I would set up that search. That's just me.
Isn't that all law school exams, though? They don't prepare them for practice.
Well, they should.
They're different than the bar exam.
They should prepare them for practice, and I'll tell you, that is my major focus in my advanced legal research. I am teaching them the skills I hope that they need to practice law, not the skills I need to know to be a law librarian. And I really focus on that. Well, client billing, for one.
I think maybe one of the things is that we need to remember sort of like what this particular assignment or assessment is. So like there are times when I'm like, yeah, I mean, if you found it, then what else, you know? And sometimes I'm like, well, why did you do that, you know? But if you're conducting a lesson that specifically is trying to get them to think about language, and you want to see some indication that they have thought about what you have told them, then something like this, which is, I would consider this to be showing up in like a small quiz or a small problem that isn't going to be a major, it's just kind of letting them know like, yay, or like try again. And so I think it is what you're specifically aiming for and when you're doing it.
Right.
Changing these sorts of assessments.
I agree, because what I'm after is, look, did you find the information and apply it appropriately to the fact pattern or the situation that I gave you? I want to see them applying the law.
Right, and you want to see them ideally applying what you covered. So, like, you want to see some indication that they didn't just show up and talk on Facebook and then do their own thing.
Well, and it's an online class. So, anyway.
And I'll join you on that soapbox. I will out myself. That's one of my biggest pet peeves about some of the advanced legal research instruction that I see. I practiced law for 4 years before I became a law librarian, and I find that a lot of the direction that we've gone in is we're going back onto our library training rather than thinking about what our students are going to go off to do. So I completely agree with you. When I was conceiving this, I think this also includes like the memo that we just had a contributory negligence issue in it. And so this kind of goes a little bit to issue spotting too. Like, not necessarily did they use a root expander or correct Boolean logic, although bonus points for that. It's whether they had the legal concept too, and they spotted the issue. But I completely agree, and amen. And I think it's changing. Yeah, can I get a witness?
And how you do the search is never as important as whether you got the right answer. But for me, this is the opportunity that you have to get better at searching so you will more often find the right answer quicker.
Right.
And that's why I'm making them walk through the steps of doing a good search.
And that's why I require that research workshop log and grade it, because it lets me grade it lets me kind of grade that in a different way and say, you know, if you've done this and this, because I'm also they have to tell me at the beginning of each assignment how long they think it's going to take them, and at the end how long it did take them. And of course it takes them incredibly longer than they think. And I'm able to point out, now if you had tried X, Y, and Z, so I'm giving them a lot of feedback. Anyway, it's just me.
Thank you. So we've described it. So step 3 is to stratify. So this is where you put in your intermediate steps. This one's very basic. Just went with the standard, this is not satisfactory, this is satisfactory, and this is excellent. So it's determining out what sort of midpoints you want to assign for that particular skill objective. And then finally the weight. So this was just a subpart of a much larger assignment. This was actually 10% of a two-part grading scheme. So in all actuality, I think it ended up being about 5% of their total assessment grade for this particular assignment. But you want to make sure that you, as you pointed out, you want to make sure you're weighting things appropriately. Don't overemphasize a skill that they're not going to use in practice, that may not be important, that may be specific to a particular database, because that's really not what we're trying to impart to them. We're trying to give them kind of these global skills to go forth and be effective with their own legal research. And then finally, submit feedback. And we've touched on this in a couple of different ways already in this session. But there are like 5 musts. You have to be specific, you have to be quick with your feedback, you have to be future focused, tell them what they can do to do this task better going forward. Be candid, tell them why you're giving them the feedback that you are. And be inclusive, which kind of falls into a category of don't unnecessarily tear down or alienate them from the learning process, because some people that will just shut them down and you'll never have their attention again during the semester. And then these are just 3 road hazards that we encountered over the past several semesters. And some of them have come out in our discussion. And the first one is don't let the students' quest for a quick answer undermine your assessment. That's where it comes in with having them describe their research process. Don't give them something they can Google and find the answer to, and there's no way for you to double check how they actually arrived at that answer, because then you're teaching them nothing. Law students are busy people, as we all know. They have a lot of competing things going on with their time, and unfortunately, although we don't like to think this way, sometimes legal research and learning those skills is not at the top of their agenda. So make sure that your assessments, kind of outsmart them in a way. Don't shy away from assessing the trickier to measure competencies. What we found was in the first couple semesters, we weren't testing the students' analytical skill very effectively, and so we would get to the end of the semester and they would have, their issue spotting was terrible, their ability to analyze the material that they found successfully and apply it to their situation was really wanting, and that's a 3-wheeled car. That's taking no one anywhere, and they're going to be at the side of the road as probably a poor unfortunate associate. So we don't want to leave them with that sort of vehicle going forward. And the final one, and this seems really obvious, but we're also busy people. Don't neglect to periodically reassess whether your own assessments are working and whether you need to tweak them or change them or adjust them in some manner to better achieve the learning objectives of your course. And with that said, thank you all for your time. And does anyone have any questions or things that we didn't cover, or questions, I think, for other people in the audience, because there's a great diversity of, sorry.
Will your slides be posted on the
Yes.
website? Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. And